Hi, we're joined by Ric Blaxill from Bauer Media. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Pleasure.
The Bauer debate. Just wanted to ask you a bit about your role. Obviously, you know, for the last 5 years, everything has changed with the advent of social media and digital. What's changed in your role?
I think the way we work content across brands a little bit more, joining up the business and trying to communicate to listeners and viewers and readers on more platforms. And probably the best example of that in probably the last 6 or 7 months is what we've been able to do with Heat as a brand. It was previously working in different silos, so the magazine wouldn't talk to the radio station, the TV station didn't even exist, and there was no connection between radio and Heat World. And the Lucy Cave and myself and Dave Young basically sat down in a room and decided to kick down all the silos and try and make Heat as a brand. So the way we shared content across all of the platforms, it meant it went to a broader range of people and more people. And even from a radio perspective, I dropped the word radio from all of our Heat radio branding, and there were some people in radio who were saying, well, why have you dropped radio? It's the most important. Heat radio is that's the way you'll cut through. And I disagreed. I just thought Heat will cut through, and if we play that card, it then says to the magazine and to the TV and to Heat World that we are truly committed to being one brand and not just working as our own kind of little satellite part of the Heat brand.
So rather than as something to be scared of, actually brands should be embracing this kind of change and work out how they can operate on a number of different areas.
That's right, yeah, and it can really work nicely. I mean, you know, when we get an exclusive piece of content, like fairly recently we had a really great interview with Robbie Williams that worked really well on radio. But I offered the interview to the magazine to transcribe. I offered it to Heat World as a bit of audio before it went out on Heat Radio. And again, people are going, well, it's a radio exclusive, why do you want to share that? And I just thought, well, if you read it, it's not going to want to stop you listening to it. And if you kind of hear it on Heat World and they're just little teaser clips, it will then direct you to enjoying the experience on radio. So it's rather than going, no, Robbie Williams is ours and that's just a radio thing, it was like, well, let's share it with the whole brand. And of course, when you go back to Robbie and his management, you say, yeah, it exists on radio, but now there's some editorial in the magazine and it's up on Heat World, and Heat TV are teasing the fact that this sort of activity is going on. So the reach, you know, the more people this content is touching is amplified beyond the radio audience.
And do you find that when you're looking at breaking new music, you use all the areas as well? Because I think you mentioned talked before about how television's less of an area for that.
Yeah.
So how do you go about that?
I think it's finding the music that fits the particular brand. So I mean, with our PlayStations around the UK, you know, it's very kind of mainstream pop. And the example of working with Emily Sandé and EMI and her management on that, you know, Emily is an amazing artist, had incredible success, but people forget that at one point she hadn't released anything and no one knew who she was. And that's where we worked with EMI to properly support. I was very lucky in hearing probably 6 months before the music hit the mainstream what the album sounded like and what the key tracks were going to be. So the label brought me in and I was able then to work out a strategy, if I felt the music was right, and I felt it was, of how we could support her as an artist. And Bauer is a part of the success story of Emily Sandé. There are loads of other parts of the success, but when they needed support right at day one, we were there to say, here's a new artist, here's a great song, and it just connected with all of our listeners.
Well, as we work with him, I'm always happy to be involved with you guys as well.
Yeah.
Have you found that anything's changed due to sort of social media and people talking to each other on your stations, people interacting more with individuals on the stations or less? Yeah,
it's more, and I think that's another great thing. It's another door that's been kicked down. And when I'm talking to presenters and talking about our radio stations internally to production teams and presenters, it's about opening up the studio door, so it's not just this closed environment where it's a presenter doing their own thing. You know, if you open up the door, you can let the listeners in more, and we find that, you know, interactions through Facebook and Twitter are just are blossoming and just really growing at an amazing rate. And it's just because people are approachable, presenters are approachable, radio stations are approachable, and we treat our listeners with a lot of respect, and actually they can come up with some really great ideas as well. So it's like working with them almost on a creative level sometimes, as well as
feed content as well.
Yeah, they can come up with something in a tweet where you can look at it and go, oh, that's really good. The other day on Planet Rock, one of the listeners sent in a T-shirt. They had them wearing a T-shirt that was like an old Led Zeppelin T-shirt they'd had from about 1976. So we stuck it on Facebook, and the reaction was incredible. Suddenly all of the listeners were like sending in T-shirts they'd dug out the back of the wardrobe that meant a lot to them. We've all got a favourite T-shirt. So we're like, wow, this is incredible. So we just went on air and started calling it T-shirt Tuesday. And suddenly, like, the whole thing has opened up on social media. But it started with a listener just sending in this photograph, and then we saw that it had appeal, so we could then just open it up to everybody else.
So they feel they're able to do that, and does that, I suppose, influence the kind of DJs and presenters you have in the future, because they need to be able to operate on not just talk at people, they need to be able to talk with people.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right, and we do a lot of that through Snoop sessions, which are where we will coach presenters and go through their shows link by link, so they're on brand with a message that we want to get out across the station, but also how they interact with listeners. And you hit it right on the head. It is not about talking at people, it's talking to people, and that's one of the things we're having to work on with some of our specialist music stations, is that everyone's got so much knowledge, it can be quite scary because they want to impart it all the time. So we're saying you don't really need to say all that, it's a conversation we're having, it's not like a lecture every time the mic comes up. And you know, presenters really respond to that well and can see that's the way to communicate with a listener.
So it sounds like a really exciting time to be at Bauer.
Yeah, it is, and we've just we've just acquired Planet Rock, which is, you know, a fantastic rock station. There's nothing out there like it. You know, it does what it says on the tin. It plays great classic rock. We're bringing new artists through as well on that. So again, we're supporting the next generation of rock stars. And Al Murray's joined the station, who, you know, is a well-known comedian. It's quite a high-profile signing for us, but a complete obsessive about rock music and really connected with a lot of artists. Yeah, and he's an amazing kick-ass drummer. I mean, he's played Download the last 3 years in his own band, and he's not one of those guys that's just he's proper Keith Moon crash bang wallop. So, you know, he really puts a lot into his drumming, and so that's just another dynamic. And for me and for the station, we know that actually we can connect with the rock audience, and it's like, well, how do we create greater awareness of what this product is, because we're really proud of it. So by bringing Al on, the listeners know he's a rock fan, so that's not a problem, but we can then work him being with the station through all of the great comedy sites, comedy social media, comedy event, everything. So it actually helps create awareness of Planet Rock to people who aren't aware of it, and they can then come in and enjoy the show. And if they enjoy our show, the trick is, if we get all the programming around it really nailed, then they will stay with us.
That's excellent. And you also mentioned Bauer events, so
yeah.
What anything we can look forward to coming up?
Yeah, we've got events coming up across the summer. We've got a summer event at the end of July at Key 103 at the MEN Arena. We're at the Echo Arena in Liverpool at the end of July, and also in Leeds with our Party in the Park event, which is 70,000 people attending that, which is an open air event, which is amazing. The other two events are about 14,000 each. So what we try and do is work with artists, and so we put all the events together so the artists can move between one event to the other. So from their point of view, it's great promotion because they'll be getting talked up on all the radio stations, but they'll actually be performing to over 100,000 people in the space of a couple of days. So it's really, really powerful. I think we just need to make sure that people understand the value and the scale of our events, because they're out of London. Sometimes it's difficult for the record companies get it and they want to work with us, but it's just making sure that other people, and you know, in terms of sponsors and clients and agencies, see that all this activity is going on around the UK, and it's really good.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, pleasure.
Thank you.